help themselves. So, as Prime Minister, I've made it a national priority to mainstream disaster risk management into every tier of governance and every corner of our society. From land use planning and infrastructure development to climate adaptation and community education, we are building a culture of resilience that is data-driven, locally grounded, and globally informed. Let us begin with the facts. According to the International Displacement Monitoring Center and the UN High Commissioner for Refugees, over 20 million people are displaced every year by climate-related disasters. These are not just numbers. Behind every statistic is a family torn apart, a child out of school, a community forced to start over. The economic toll is staggering. To the cost of rebuilding cities, rehabilitating survivors, and restoring services, these costs can reach billions of dollars. So in light of this, Jamaica has adopted a multi-pronged strategy to reduce risk, respond effectively, and build forward stronger. Our approach includes strengthening national institutions and legislation, and I'll speak about that a little later, investing in science, technology, and early warning systems, building capacity at the community level, aligning national planning frameworks with climate resilience, and ensuring that disaster risk reduction is cross-cutting, touching education, housing, health, infrastructure, energy, and the environment. We have also advanced the review of our national disaster risk management framework, and we are developing a new policy to ensure we are fit for purpose. One of our greatest assets in disaster management is communication. Thanks to our partners, including the government of Japan through JICA, we now have a robust national disaster emergency telecommunication system and public safety network. These allow us to disseminate real-time alerts, mobilize response teams, and reach even our most remote communities in times of crisis. But while we have made progress, we must be honest about where gaps remain. Now, following the devastation of Hurricane Berry last year, we established the Disaster Risk Management Review Committee to assess our disaster preparedness and response efforts in the aftermath of the hurricane with a view to learning from the experience and strengthening our readiness and response to both natural and man-made hazards. The committee was chaired by Major General Anthony Anderson and comprised distinguished experts, including Dr. Paris Leahy, Ms. Trudy Deans, and Mr. Jonathan Brown, and I want to thank them for their work and contribution. Ms. Deans is here representing the committee. The committee undertook a comprehensive review of our disaster framework, identifying key vulnerabilities and priority areas for reform, from ODPEM's leadership role and the structure of that organization and its current state of leadership, and community preparedness, another critical element, specifically now looking at the various local government committees and the community response organizations, to disaster financing, the role of the Ministry of Finance with the buffers created in our budgets and the insurance that we have signed on to. We looked at infrastructure resilience, specifically looking at the work of the NWA, the NWC, JPS, and we also examined the use of technology. And that, I'll say a few words on the use of technology later on in my presentation. While Jamaica has made significant strides in early warning systems, again, that is to be noted, and we again give our appreciation to the government of Japan through JICA for assisting us with the establishment of an emergency communication system. We have structured planning, particularly in the Ministry of Finance. I don't think anyone could complain about the speed at which the Ministry of Finance responded with the resources. I certainly didn't hear any complaints from the Minister of Labour and Social Security. I didn't hear any complaints from the Minister of Education. The response was swift. And I didn't hear any complaint either from the Minister of Local Government, except to say they want more. But I think the Ministry of Finance should be commended. I don't think that the country would immediately associate the Ministry of Finance with disaster preparedness and response. But, you know, that is where it starts. If you don't have an economy, then you're going to be relying on other people to help you recover from your disaster. And I want to say as clearly as I can, what has changed in Jamaica in the last decade is that we are able as a country, right, with God's protection and blessings, we have been able to stand on our own 2 feet and respond effectively to disaster. That's a national achievement. And that is because we have run the economy well. So not only can the economy nyam, the economy can drink, the economy help you to recover from disaster. Right? The economy. So, but there are issues. We were spared the worst in our recent disaster, Hurricane Beryl. And being at the forefront of the response, I saw the gaps. I saw the potential threats. And what the role of leadership is, it is to ensure that even though you escaped the worst, you don't just sit back and say, it's past. You have to strengthen the institution so that if there were to be a return of the threat, you can genuinely be able to stand up to it. So there were some gaps. For example, we must improve the resilience of our utilities. The JPS must undertake a comprehensive review of its distribution network and replace those compromised and broken poles, and as quickly as possible, replace those that are needed to be replaced with concrete poles. Now, I know that they have started that work. There is a budget, a capital allocation for that, and that work must proceed right throughout the year with great speed and alacrity, so that, God forbid that there is any other disaster to come, that we are not without electricity in those areas for any extended period of time. And I know that the JPS is addressing that, but we must say it publicly, and we must hold them to account for it, to move very swiftly in ensuring that the distribution network is resilient and resistant to these weather events. As we examined the operations of the NWC, clearly, except for gravity-fed systems, once the electricity is out, then the entire country would be out of water. So the NWC has to develop independent power sources. It has to have its own backup strategy, its own backup capability. And so the government has started work towards ensuring that the critical areas for supply and distribution, that those pumping stations will have backup generators. That's a long-term objective, but we're going to ensure that we at least have some short-term capabilities. And it is a two-pronged strategy. One strategy is to solarize some of the pumping stations that we have so that we have independent power. And the other strategy is to introduce generators that can carry the pumps for a reasonable period of time should there be a failure in the electricity utility. And we have started that recently in the Red Hills area. We opened a solar plant at one of our pumping stations, which will help in the event of a natural disaster, providing those panels aren't blown away, they remain firmly anchored. Then they will be able to generate electricity and keep those pumps going. Housing. The housing sector is growing rapidly in Jamaica. And the experience of Hurricane Gilbert would have seared into the minds of Jamaicans the importance of putting on their roofs, following the guidelines of the building codes. So a lot of Jamaicans would have moved away from zinc roofing to put it on concrete slabs. But we noticed that, and flying over the areas that were impacted by the recent Hurricane Beryl, and just looking at some of the roofs, and then when we went on the ground and examined, it was clear. Those roofs that did not use hurricane straps, those were the roofs that were destroyed. It was crystal clear. So it appears to me, and indeed coming out of the report, that the parish councils, the approval entities, and the Ministry of Local Government, through a national public campaign, must reinforce the building codes as it relates to roofs and the need to build according to code and use, in particular, hurricane straps to secure our roofs. But roofs were not the only areas of housing that were damaged. Windows. Many persons suffered water intrusion because of the kinds of windows that they used, and so there may have to be some guidance on that as to how to secure your windows during hurricanes and the types of windows to use to secure your homes during hurricanes. We also found that the houses that were particularly affected by the disaster, and again, this is not rocket science, were the houses that were built in areas that were known to be disaster prone. So people who built in the swamps or close to swamps, who built on the gully banks or close to the gully banks, who built on unstable slopes, those were the houses that were most affected. People who built in areas that are known for flooding. So, in a sense, Minister Mackenzie, we already know where the damage is going to take place. We will have to strengthen our settlement policy, our enforcement as it relates to where people settle and how they settle. And there are communities that are there for years, for decades. It's going to be very difficult to move them. You ask them to move, they don't want to move. They're emotionally connected to the community. But my own view is that if you know you're going to build in an area that is prone, the technology to build and build as safely as you can exists. In other communities, in other jurisdictions where you're building in low-lying areas, you could build on stilts. They make provision for that because they know there's going to be a flood. They try to avoid building near the canal or the gully. These are just simple things that we can do. And our entities that are responsible for enforcing and responsible for building standards, these are things that we're going to have to look at and enforce, but at the same time,